Okay, so today we're going to kind of put all of our skills together. So a lot of this is going to be reviewing what we've been doing over our last 3 sessions, and then we're going to add in some animation. And most people don't even think that, oh, what, Photoshop can do animation? It totally can. So this is just a little look at what we are going to be creating. Just some very simple movement of objects, okay? We're not adding any flair to it. We're just doing kind of a basic keyframe animation, but it's enough to get you those skills. So we're going to demo all kinds of fun things today and really talk about how you can start selling some compositions. Now what we've done today is more of a fantasy type of work, but all of the things I'm going to share can be used for creating things that you'll use in work as well. So make sure that you've downloaded the practice files, or if you have your own photos that you want to try to animate, please use those as well. I will be uploading our session recap and emailing you, and then if you would please take the time to give me some feedback and let me know if you're interested in fall 2020 offerings. I definitely would love feedback on this kind of style training, if it worked for you, what you would do to improve it. If you would like to see more of these styles of trainings in the fall, and then again, anything you're interested about in the fall. So without further ado, let's hop over to Photoshop. So if you dig into your zip file, you will find that I have just created a Photoshop document that has everything layered in together. So we have some fish, and if you want to play with the fish later, you can. We won't play with them today. We have some buildings we're going to be working with. We have our whale, and then we have our background. So we're going to get started with just kind of prepping things out and reviewing some of our skills with cutting out. So we're going to remove the background of this whale. And so we're going to be doing a couple of different techniques to remove backgrounds, just to show you all the different ways and kind of review all the different ways you can do that. So we're going to start by popping in to the properties panel. And again, we're on our whale layer, and we're just going to remove the background. And look how quickly that created a lovely little mask for us. So one click, we're off and running. And again, that was through the properties panel. And then, as we always do, we're going to convert this to a smart object just by control clicking in the layer panel and smart object. So now our whale is ready to go, and we're going to start putting those buildings on top of our whale. So we need to dial in here, and most of these I've already cut out, but let's just cut out the background of this water tower. So I'm going to use the same technique. Actually, we're not going to use the same technique. We are going to do a quick select, and let's just do it. Actually, let's do a lasso. That's what we're going to do. Okay, I messed up my notes for what we're going to do. So we're just going to kind of do a quick lasso of this object. Actually, no, we're not. I didn't make very good notes about what we're gonna. Let's just do this one. There we go. So we're just gonna kind of select this object. And I'm not worried if this isn't perfect, because we're gonna take a lot of this out. So I'm gonna right now try to cut some of these parts out. So I'm holding down my Alt key and running back through here. That's doing a little bit better job. I just have some of this area on the inside that I need to work with. That isn't a problem. So we're going to dive into this. And start working in this area as well. So I'm going to enter my quick mask, which we've done before, and we're just going to brush these areas out. So again, painting with black. Using my bracket key to decrease size. And one trick I can do when I'm using my brush is to use the Shift key. So I can click here and then hold down my Shift key and clean all of that up. So you can see this is just kind of a different way of selecting. And again, I am not too worried if this isn't perfect, because it's going to be pretty small. Now, if I were doing this for an actual like client work or that type of thing, I would be a little bit more selective about it, but in this case, I'm really not. Make our brush a little bigger, get all this area. And so the point is there's a lot of different ways that you can start selecting backgrounds, cutting out objects, just based on how much time you have and what you need to be doing. Get the shadow down here. All right, so we're going to say that's pretty good for right now. So I've actually got the water tower selected. I'm going to do Shift Command I, which gives me the inverse. And then we'll add that layer mask. Oops. We're not going to do Shift Command I. So now we've started cutting it out, but I've still got some areas I want to get out. I just missed those. Those were a big mistake. Well, here's a cool trick that I can do to get in there and just kind of delete these areas. So I'm going to select those with my selection tool. And then I'm going to Shift Delete. And I'm going to fill these with black. And so this is just another quick way to add and a mask, and I could use any selection tool I wanted. I just chose my polygonal lasso. I'm doing full shapes, Shift Delete, fill with black, and I could go in and do the rest of those too, but we're not going to worry about those. So we've got our water tower cut out, and now just like we've done with everything, we're going to make all of these buildings into that smart object. And I hope that that's one of the things you can really take away is anytime we're composing, converting to a smart object allows us to really have more freedom as far as scaling, sizing, editing. It kind of shortens up the layers for us, helps us with that. So now we're going to start moving things, and I think let's do one of these is going to, yeah, we're not going to use that one. All right, so we're going to just start moving and scaling. So I'm going to Command T to transform these. And when I transform them, I don't need to hold the Shift key down. You can change that preference through Edit Preferences if you want to. And you can see in areas where we weren't as exacting, it really doesn't matter right here. And we can rotate. So the advantage of using Command T is that it gives me full access to both the rotation and the scale. So moving on, let's get some of these in here. So we're going to move this in. Actually, I may not use that one. I like this one a little bit better. Okay, so we're going to move this one in. And so what I want to do is I'm scaling. Part of the way to sell this type of composition is to really think about scale. So thinking about like, okay, how big would the water tower really be in place of this building? And then kind of arranging things so that I can get that look. So that now this house is in front and I can kind of move it like that. So with these, how I want to scale these is I want the doors to basically be the same size. Oops. And so I'm keeping an eye on my doors because that's, again, that's how I'm selling this, is that this is a little town that we've got on his back. And I think I want a little bit more room. So I'm going to select that, and we're just going to move you. So I just shift and clicked on these, and that allowed me to select them and then move them over. And I kind of like that, but I think I want this to be behind the water tower. a little bit. There we go. So I've used some scale to kind of bring that in. And you can see the doors, little edit here, are the same size. So then I have everything in scale. I've used some layering to kind of put things on different layers. Now we're going to do the part, if you noticed in the video, where it looked like these were kind of tied on the back of the whale. So to do that, we're going to grab our brush tool and we're going to set up a new layer. So I'm just going to hit my new layer button, and I am going to use a brown brush. It's going to be a small hard brush to brush this in. Well, to get that brown, what I'm going to do is just color pick from my buildings. So you can see I can just click in here, and I kind of liked one of those first ones. Let's get a nice brown. That's a nice one. Okay. So I've got a nice brown in here, and I'm going to make sure that my brush is a hard brush. And the next thing I'm going to edit is my flow. So let me just show you the difference. So I'm going to just brush here. So that's my flow at 100%. Now I'm going to change it to around 20. And this doesn't need to be exact. And that's my brush around 20. So you can see how these give you kind of different looks here. So I'm going to make this brush really small, and I've decreased my flow. And I can use that same shift trick that we used before. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to hold down, hold my shift, and add there. So if I zoom in, you can see it's not necessarily a perfect rope. I'm actually going to make it a little bit darker. And we're going to make it a little smaller. So you can just Command Z and go back. And we're just going to add a couple of different ties in here, just kind of picking key parts of the building, kind of going in at the corners. I can bump up this flow if I want to change that. Maybe this one looks a little bit deeper. Oops. There's my shift. So these are all added into that same layer. Well, they're not quite looking realistic yet. So we want to start editing these. So the great way to kind of create some bend into these is to use the Liquify tool. So if I go up to Filter and then Liquify, and Liquify is kind of a cool tool. If you ever want to do any like caricature work, it's great for that. And we're just going to be using this this forward warp tool. And we're just going to add a little bit of bend to these ropes. And you can kind of see how it's pulling those ropes. And that's what I want. I just want to kind of bend those just a little bit. And I can change the size of this so that it kind of changes how much I'm warping it. And just adding a little bit of movement to these ropes. So we'll hit OK. And so we just added a little bit of movement. Next, we're going to add a highlight to this. So with our highlight, we actually want to come down here and we're going to lock our transparent pixels. So that's going to keep us from manipulating any of the transparent pixels. I'm going to grab my brush and I'm just going to go a little bit lighter. So I'm in that same color, but just a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to kind of brush along the side. This is a good time to maybe play with the hardness of that brush. And you can get a pretty big brush too as well for this, because we're just going to add a little bit of highlight in here. Now the key with adding highlight is you kind of want to add it as if there was a single light source. And as Bob Ross would say, this is your world, so you decide where that light source is. And you can see that's starting to add some depth to these ropes that we have. So our final piece of detail on these brushes, or on these ropes, and I'm noticing I have a little thing with my building here. I'm just going to bring this in, transform him down. He needs a little rotation on him. There we go. All right, so back to our ropes. Our final step here is to add an effect. So if you go down to the bottom of your layers panel, you're going to have an effects menu. All of these options, and we played with some blends before, but you can add these to shape and to text. So this same bevel emboss can be added to text. So there's our before, there's our after. And you can see this is where it starts to get some three-dimensionality. You can play with all of these options. I'm just going to accept the default so we can keep moving here and hit OK. So looking pretty good so far, but this whale, the color is just off. So there's a problem with it kind of blending into the overall background. So this is where I'm going to bring in those adjustment panels. So when we first learned adjustments, we learned it in terms of correcting photos, but you can also use them as part of your creative process. So I'm going to go up into color balance. And what I think about this whale is it's a little too blue. And so I kind of just want to take away some of that blueness. So I'm just going to add a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. And I'm just trying to get it to be a little more blending into that background. All right, so there's my before, there's my after. So I took away that blue kind of color cast that the whale had. All right. Now we're going to go ahead, and what we want to do is just go back, and we're going to continue to make smart objects out of these. So we've added that to the whale. And I think I want to do one here as well. That's good. All right, so the next part of really selling this is we want to get our whale behind this land mass. So I'm going to hide my whale for a second. And actually, I think we're at a stage where we can probably convert all of these to an object. Let's just say we are. All right, so we have another opportunity to get this land mass selected. And so we can, again, what are some tools we can use? Well, we can play with our object selection tool. So I'm going to just select this as an object and see how it does. Not really, oh, we were on the wrong layer. That makes a big difference. All right, so get this selected. And not bad, there's a couple of areas I want to tweak, and you can see between the trees we need to tweak as well. So this is the point where we're going to go into that select and mask. And so if I have areas that I need to kind of fully brush back, which that's going to be some of these areas, and get in there. And I don't need that much, so we'll leave that be. And now I want to get in, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this. I want to kind of get these trees a little more so that when there's not that blue back there. So I'm going to use my refine edge. I heard someone refer to this, one of my fellow Adobe education leaders referred to this as the hairbrush tool. And I thought that was hilarious because that's really what people use it for the most. And so I'm just refining all of these edges, and I don't know that I need to go this far, but just in case. And I can always come back to this mask and tweak it a little bit, but I am good with that. So we're going to hit OK. Oops. Let's go back into select a mask. A couple things that I didn't quite get. I missed some whole trees there, didn't I? see if we can add you back in. And we might ignore those trees. They're being difficult. Okay. So coming down here, I want to decontaminate those colors, and you can see how that shifted some things. And so I'm going to output this to a new layer with the layer mask and hit OK. And so you can see I've got this nice layer mask created, and I'm going to make that a smart object, reveal this background, because now this whale is going to go between those two layers. So the reason why I wanted it with a new layer is because I just didn't want it cut out on this background. I wanted it to be a layered copy. So now my whale can move into the scene and everything is fine. So this layer has just that, and that has the full background. So now as I look at this, one of the things is I'd like this to all kind of have the same color look. So I'm going to be on the very top layer, and I'm again going to go up to my adjustments panel. And again, using these for not edits, but for creativity, I'm going to do a lookup. So these are all kinds of different looks that you can apply in here. So you can see I like that one. What does Fuji look like? Oh, I don't like that one quite as much. Yeah, I think that crisp warm is what I want to go with. And so I can adjust this if I want to adjust the opacity of it, but that's my before and that's my after. So that color lookup just adds to that feeling of really kind of a whole look for this piece. So now I'm ready to convert this into a smart object. I'm going to convert a couple of these objects, and I'm ready to move my whale. So my whale is going to stay on its own layer and move. Actually, we're going to leave this as is because I want to make sure my whale doesn't get thrown out of that color lookup. So let's go ahead and look at animation. So I'm going to go to Window and Timeline. And there's two different types of timelines. You can create a video timeline or frame animation. If I were creating a GIF, I would use frame animation. And if you want to learn how to do that, I think I've got at least one video on JSchool Tech on how to create animated GIFs. We'll do a video timeline. So I make sure I pick that from my dropdown, and then I click video timeline. And so what I'm looking at down here, my video timeline, and I'll just make this a little larger so we can see it, is I'm animating my whale layer. And what I want my whale layer to do is kind of move from one place to the other. And so you can see as I toggle these open, I have different transform options. So I could scale it, I could change the opacity, I could do all of that. So I'm going to move my whale layer, and he's going to start over here. And he's going to be kind of up here. And I'm going to click my very first keyframe, so this little timer, and you can see that added a keyframe. Then I'm going to move down to the end, and I'm going to move my whale. So he's going to come down like this, and we'll say right there is where I like him. And I'm going to add another keyframe there. So that added another keyframe. So this is the animation we've created. And if we play through, he just moves like that. Now, if we wanted other kind of effects, like let's say that once we saw his tail, I wanted the tail to move back and forth, that type of animation you can't do in Photoshop. But I could take this layer into After Effects and use some tools in there to make that wave. So in Photoshop, you're kind of limited with your animations, but if you're talking simple animations, clouds moving across the sky, text coming just across, you can certainly do that. So now we've got everything transformed. We've got our animation added in. So now I need to export this. So I'm going to, first of all, should have been saving all along. I wasn't. All right. So I am going to export. And what I want to do is I want to render out this as a video. If I were going to do a GIF, I would save for web and pick a GIF for an animated GIF. I'm going to render the video. And I will say that rendering video, and this is a short, like we've got like maybe 2 seconds worth of video here. It does take a little longer in Photoshop than it takes in other programs like Premiere. All right, so here's my name. Where's this going to go? It's going to go into this. I think I've got one in there already, so we'll call this number 2. Our format, H.264, always H.264. We're going to make sure that we're on high quality, but just note you could drop down. So if I wanted to take this to like a YouTube, I can click on YouTube and it's going to save that. We'll just go ahead and leave this on a high quality. This is our document size, which is the same as this size. And render. So it is saving that out. It's exporting the video. And we should have a video in there. You guys get to see how absolutely crazy my desktop is. All right. So there is our animated landscape with our whale moving in. And there you go. All right, so I'm gonna pause my recording.